Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sallam. نوينا تعلم التعليم وتذكر وتذكير ونفع الانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث والتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء للهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقرب ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. سبحانك لا علم لا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم أما بعد. Alhamdulillah. Last lesson we were blessed to finish that particular stage of one's life, which in essence is the life that we know. And we concluded by saying a couple of things. One was the statement of Ibn Qayyim, which is anchored in the hadith. الإنسان لا يذكر عند موتي إلا ما كان محافظا عليه في حياته. That at the point of death, and we ask Allah for protection inshallah, that someone will articulate what they were accustomed to articulating in this life. And we shared that sad story of an individual who was just besotted by a woman, and he ended up saying that situation or repeating that situation even at the point of death. وَعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And then on the last thing we mentioned from the text was where Imam al-Haddad mentions, never wish for death. Okay, don't be لَا يَتَمَنَّ الْمَوْتَ أَحَدَكُمْ. None of you should long for death, save in particular circumstances when someone feels that their faith may be in peril if they were to live longer, not because you are afflicted by tribulation or the like in relation to one's health or wealth. And we brought the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا يتمنى أحدكم الموت لضر أصابه. That no one should seek out or ask for or wish for death based on a hardship that has befallen one. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَابُدَّ فَاعِلًا. And if beyond this, for whatever reason, someone may say, فَلْيَقُلْ اللَّهُمَّ أَحْيِنِي مَا كُنْتَ الْحَيَاةَ خَيْرًا لِي. Oh Allah, keep me alive for as long as life is better for me. Better for me meaning in my akhirah. وَتُوَفَّنِي إِذَا كَانَتْ الْوَفَاةُ خَيْرٌ لِي. And likewise take me out of this world if death is better for me. And then likewise, we had mentioned the hadith about what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah make each and every single one of us from amongst this group of people, longs to see people, those who what? Long to see Him. Those that have a desire to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, likewise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a desire to meet them. Imam al-Zabidi mentions in his commentary on the Ihya al-Madinah about a man who's approaching death. And he's lying next to his son and he's very sad, meaning the son's very sad, looking at what? The sakarat al-maut, the anguish that his father is subject to. And he says to his son, he goes, don't be sad, my dear son, because I long to meet Qabid al-Arwah. I long to meet Malik al-Maut. Greater than people have a desire to have intimacy amongst one another. His intimacy in his what? Greeting who? Qabid al-Arwah. Which is the state of who? The exact state of Sayyidina Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, that on the point of death, when his wife looks upon him and says, what? Wa taraba, meaning how sad in relation to what Sayyidina Bilal was subject to. And he says what? Wa faraha, la ilaha illallah, what a joyous moment. Where in the pangs of death? Wa faraha, farah, extreme happiness. Ghadan nalqa al-ahibba, Muhammad wa hizbah. Why? Because the next day, inshallah, if my soul's to be taken, I meet Muhammad and his party and his group of people. And so that should be one of the supplications that ulama say is what? Make death be the best day of our lives. Right? Alongside what? Make aftal ayamina al-yawm alli nalqaka. Make the best day of our life, likewise, the day when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, now that we've finished that, we're moving on to now, we're on page 41. What Dr. Mustafa has translated and termed this the intermediate realm, the realm of the barzakh. And so Imam Haddad says that the third life extends from where? The time that a man leaves the dunya at death until the moment he rises from his grave at the what? Nafkh fis sur, at the point when the horn is blown. And he goes, هَذَا هُوَ الْبَرْزَخ. This is the intermediate realm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and before them is a barzakh until the day they are raised, from the Quran. And so we've taken this before. that death is what? It's defined as mufaraqat ruh al-jasad. It's the point that the soul departs from the body. And we know that in the books it's mentioned that what? It comes from the soul, departs from what? Leaving from the feet upwards until فَإِذَا بَلَقَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ, when it exits from one's throat. However, what he's going to say here, and likewise in the comment, is what? That when we speak about like life ceasing, the cessation of life is what? Just the start of another stage. The lives of man. You're just moving on, transitioning from one stage to the next. And so the cessation of life doesn't mean everything stops. Rather, it's a transitioning from one stage to another stage, which is what Imam Ghazali says. And likewise, Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, rahmatullahi alayhi, in his book Al-Iman, he says, Ibara, death is what? Ibara an intiqal min manzil dunya ila manzil al-akhirah. You're just moving one stage to the what? The next. The stage of this life to the stage of the akhirah. And so, again, we start in the first lesson, we spoke about what? Alim al-arwah, what's known as the malakut. Right? Because there's different stages or realms, if you like. And we said that the alim al-arwah or alim al-malakut is when what? Alim al-rabbani, kun fayakun, i.e. the world of the souls, the realm of the souls, where the souls roam without being what? Embodied or encapsulated into body. And then this world was known as alim al-shuhada, the witnessed realm, which is what? It's the realm of where, again, souls are encapsulated, bodied, quote unquote, in a body. And then we move on now from alim al-shahada, which is this ephemeral, fleeting existence, to what? Alim al-jabarut. So we're not saying that we're turning back to what? Alim al-malakut, because that's when the soul was in its kun fayakun stage. Rather, it's a stage of jabr. Qahr is what? Jabr means qahr, ay qahr al-ilahi. That now we see the full manifestation of what? Veils being lifted, and how the unseen realm now becomes what? Fully visible to us. And that's known as what? The realm of the barzakh. And so, when we're speaking about the point of death, i.e. the extraction of the soul, and we've spoken about this before in detail in lessons prior, that what do we know about the soul? وَيَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. They ask you about the ruh, the soul. قُلْ, say, Ya Muhammad, إِنَّ الرُّوحِ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. Which is why they call it what? Amr al-Rabbani. That the soul is from what? The affairs of your Lord. وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And you've only been bestowed a limited or a small amount of knowledge. They say that once they asked Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, who was on a boat, and they asked him about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a sparrow, a bird, came and dipped its beak into the ocean. And he said that our knowledge in relation to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its totality, from the first to the last, right, from the first to the last, is like what the water was extracted from the ocean of the beak, on the beak of that sparrow. And so the affairs of the soul are known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Save that what? We know in the Quran, it speaks about what? Extraction of the soul. وَالنَّازِيَاتِ غَرْقًا. What does that mean? The violent extraction. Angels come to what? Violently extract the soul. وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا. And others are what? Removed or extracted with ease. So look at the juxtaposition here. It's very vivid imagery, isn't it? وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا. The angels come to violently extract the soul. And in a hadith which is authenticated in the Sunan of Imam Nasa'i, it's a long hadith which will take parts of it because there's an optimistic side in what? The Prophet detailing, and it's in great detail, vivid detail, in relation to how the soul of a believer is extracted in contrast to the soul of a non-believer. And so in the Sunan of Imam Nasa'i, the Prophet said, إِنِّ الْعَبْدِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, the servant of God who is a person of La ilaha illallah, a believer. إِذَا كَانَ مِنْ إِنْقِطَاعٍ مِنْ دُنْيَا وَإِقْبَالَ لَلْآخِرَةِ. When someone now again severs his relationship to this ephemeral world, and now he starts to approach the next world. نَزَلَ إِلَيْهِ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَلَائِكَةٌ. So a good believer, may Allah make us from these, inshallah, ameen, ameen, ya Rab. A good believer, that when the soul is to be extracted, angels now descend from the seven heavens. بيد وجوه كأن وجوههم شمس, that their faces are just radiant like the suns glowing. معهم كفن من أكفان الجنة, and they're carrying what? They're carrying shrouds from paradisal shrouds. This is just at the point when someone of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, a good person, is about to pass away. وَالْحَنُوتِ مِنْ حَنُوتِ الْجَنَّةِ, and likewise, they're not just bringing paradisal shrouds for the believer. Likewise, they're bringing what? Hanut, which is this fragrant compound, which is a sunnah to apply to the kafan, to the shrouds. يَجْلِسُونَ مِنْهُ مَدَّ الْبَصَرِ, and so when the person is about to die, they sit at the distance of the eyesight, as far as the eye can see. ثُمَّ يَجِيُ مَلَكَ الْمَوْتِ, and then the angel of death comes, حَتَّى يَجْلِسْ عِنْدَ رَأْسِهِ, until he sits at the head of the person who's about to die. فَيَقُولُ أَيُّهَا النَّفْسُ الْطَيِّبَةِ, and he addresses a person of belief, saying what? Or addresses the soul, I should say. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّفْسُ الطَّيِّبَةِ, oh beautiful, fragrant soul, اخرجي إلى مغفرة من الله ورضوان. Now come forth what? Come forth to the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His pleasure. لا إله إلا الله. فتخرج تسيل كما تسيل القطرة من السقاء. So now the soul will be extracted, and the imagery that the Prophet gives us is what? It's like the drop coming out of, like a container. So when it just drops out, that's like the soul being exited from a good body. نعم فيأخذها فإذا أخذها لم يدعوها في يده طرفة عين. So those angels that have come down now, they're just waiting for this moment. And it says here that the angel of death, he takes the soul, but they don't allow this person to take this. They don't allow this person's soul, to reside in the hand of the angel of death at the moment. Meaning what? The angels from heaven say, no, this one's ours. And they take him from what? The angel of death. حتى يأخذوها فيجعلوها في ذلك الكفن, and then they envelop the soul in this paradisal shroud. وفي ذلك الحنوت, and likewise in this compound made of fragrance from heaven. فيخرج منها كأطيب النفخة مسكة وجدت على وجه الأرض, and the fragrance now that starts to emanate from this soul, it's otherworldly. It's a fragrance that has never been experienced on this earth. La ilaha illallah. فَيَسْعَدُونَ بِهَا, and now they start, and the hadith is long, so they start to roam with this soul. Right? Roam. Allah speaks about this in the Quran. What? تِلْقَ الْأَرْوَاحِ, about arwah, souls being what? مُقْبَدَة and mursala. That there's certain souls that are what? Shackled. And there's certain souls that are allowed to roam free. And so this is at the point of death. This is what? قَبْلَ السُّؤَالِ. This is obviously before the questioning of the grave. And so they roam with the soul through to the seven heavens, and the hadith goes on. Until يقول الله عز وجل, until Allah says, وَعِيدُ عَبْدِي إِلَى الْأَرْضِ, now return my servant back to this earth. فَتُعَادْ رُوحَهُ, and then his soul is now reconnected to the body. Okay? Which is important to know that what? When the soul departs from the body at the point of death, there's still always going to be what? A connection, which we'll speak about inshallah when I speak about the rights of someone who's passed away. But now, subhanAllah, look at contrast. Look at the contrast of someone who's a person who is not from our tradition, i.e. a person who does not die upon La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he says, Inna al-abd al-kafir. He's still abd, isn't he? Inna al-abd al-kafir, the non-believing slave, إذا كان في انقطاع من الدنيا وإقبال من الآخرة. Again, when someone is transitioning from this world to the next, نزل عليه من السماء ملائكة. Likewise, the angels are going to descend for this as well. But they're what? Their faces are void of light. ما هم مسوح. They have like rods, iron rods. فيجلسون منه مد البصر. Again, they sit at a distance, just gazing. ثم يجيء ملك الموت, and likewise the angel of death comes until he sits at the head of this person. فيقول يا أيها النفس الخبيثة. Now with the addresses to the soul. Oh, you wretched soul, right? You filthy soul. أخرجي إلى سخط من الله. Now come forward to the wrath of God. come forward to the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, come forward to the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وغضب, and likewise his anger. فتفرق من جسده فينتزعها كما ينتزع السفود من الصوف المبلول. So now look at the imagery now that the Prophet is evoking for the soul of someone that dies in a bad state. That the soul, وَالنَّازِيَاتِ غَرْقًا, it seized violently. And it seized violently, the Prophet goes, is the example of cotton wool being on a skewer. Right? That's, La ilaha illallah, that's wool, that's now, that the skewer goes into cotton wool that's moist and just rips it out. Yeah, that's the imagery that's evoked in relation to what? The nature of a soul that does not die upon La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. فَيَأْخُذَهَا فَإِذَا أَخَذَهَا لَمْ يَدُعْهَا فِي يَدِهِ طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. Likewise here, the angels are waiting for it to remain seized in the hand of who? The angel of death. And they take this soul, and then they roam with this soul, and the soul is now cursed by the angels. حَتَّى تُعَادْرُوهُ فِي جَسَدِهِ فَيَأْتِي مَلَكَانِ. Until the angels now come, Allah decrees now that return the body again back to the soul. Return the soul back to the body. And then the angels come. One thing again, we should always aspire to be, particularly in this month of Rajab, is never, ever, ever underestimate what? Tawbah. Never, ever, ever underestimate Tawbah. Never have a bad opinion of anyone. Again, we've spoken about how the transferal of what? Meaning, last week, what did we speak about? Don't meet God, bankrupt. فَيُسُبُّ هَذَا, as the Prophet said. You come with all of your prayer, all of your but then you've cursed so-and-so, you've taken the right of so-and-so, you've hit so-and-so. Hasha. But never underestimate what? Tawbah. And we shared a hadith with you, a narration of a man called Aban ibn Ayyash. Aban ibn Ayyash was who? He's a student of Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik in Basra. And so he goes to visit Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik in Basra, meaning his grave. He's passed away. And on visiting his grave, he sees a man being buried with 4 people. And he goes, Kaif, how? He goes, they would come through the marketplace of Basra, and as they would come through with the bier, i.e. what holds the dead body, through the marketplace of Basra, many people would attend. It was known in Basra, janazas were mamlu, full of people. But this man is being buried, what? By himself, by 4 people. So he goes, let me go and help them. I'll be their 5th. And so he goes there, and he aids the people, the 4 men, in burying this individual. And so he goes, why is there no one here? There's only 4 of you. They said, we don't know who he is. They said, his mother hired us to bury this individual. And so Aban ibn Ayyash, the student of who? Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with them all. He goes to the woman, and he asks, he goes, how come there was no one here to bury your son? And she goes, that my son, and as she tells the story of her son. And what was her son? She goes, and listen to the words that she uses. Again, a mother speaking about her son. She goes, there was never a sin save that my son perpetrated that sin. I can't think of a sin save that my son perpetrated that sin. وَكَانَ عَاقٌ بِي. And likewise, he was someone who was what? Disobedient to me. We've spoken about this before, haven't we? The nature of what? Someone's perdition, their ruin, can lie at the hands of what? Being disobedient to one's parents. Save that what? That's what he's known for. So we have people potentially, I know in different communities that I've been to and the community that I came from, there are people that are known for sin. Hasha. That's just known for it. Yeah? Never have a bad opinion of those people though. Right? Always have a good opinion. Because this person, what happens to him? Towards the end of his life, before he's buried, he starts to make tawbah. Bil inkisar. In a way that he's broken. But what does he say? Allah afflicts this person after making tawbah, but his tawbah was what? Sincere. He was munkasir. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ مَنْ. God is with who? Al-munkasir. Al-munkasira. Al-qulub li ajlihi. God is with those who are heartbroken, but what? For his sake. And so this person, he makes tawbah, but Allah afflicts him with what? Illness. Until he is now on the throes of death, the last moments of his life. And so he says to his mother, he goes, my mother, don't tell people that what? I'm on the cusp of death, and don't tell people I'm still ill. Why? Because they're just your subbuk. They're just going to curse you and curse me. Because all he was known for was what? For sin. Ah, look, that person's he's sick. Oh, look, there's a fire in America. That's the wrath of God upon these people because of what? La, you don't know. Nobody knows. That's not our position. But what's going to happen? Oh, look, he's ill. Why? Because he was a sinner. Now look at him. Can't even stand up. And so he says to his mother, what? In the last throes of death, he says, my mother, he goes, because of how I treated you, when I pass away, just put your foot on my neck and say, this is the reward of someone who is aqli walideh, someone who is sinful towards his or her parents. And so he says, however, I have one request, that raise your hands to the seven heavens when I die and say what? Allahumma inni radiya anhu farda anhu. Oh Allah, I am pleased with him. So please be pleased with him. Be content with him. And so she's telling the story to Sayyidina Aban ibn Ayyash. And when she's telling the story, she goes, so I raised my hands. Because why? My son was truthful in what? His tawbah. And she goes, when I raise my hands and I place him raised, then she goes, what? Then she starts to smile and laugh. Why does she laugh? She tells Sayyidina Aban, she goes, that when we placed him in the grave, when you placed him in the grave, I heard my son's voice. And wallahi, I know the voice of my son. And what did he say? Go forth now, my mother. فَإِنِّي قَدِمْتُ عَلَى رَبٍّ كَرِيمٍ وَهُوَ رَادٍ أَنِّي غَيْرْ سَاخِطٍ. Because now I've come to a Lord who's Kareem. He's generous. And He's pleased with me. So now you can go. We see people walking day in, day out. Oh, look at this person. In fact, we see people that do lesser than this person's done. But we harbor all of these feelings, and we're waiting for people to fall over, so we can start to spread the gossip. You know about so and so. Yeah, these aren't asatir al-awwaleen. These aren't like tales of the ancient. This is the kalam of the salihin. Why? Because it allows you and me to make sense of the world. Because what is the thing, I should say, and what has been the thing that the salihin fear the most? We shared this in class before. What is it? Su al-khatima. A bad or wretched ending. No one in this room can guarantee what they're going to die upon. We just mentioned a tale of two cities, a tale of two angels, a tale of two people. Souls that, mashallah, angels are vying over to envelop them in paradisial kafan, shrouds. Souls that angels are vying over to adorn them in paradisial hanud, fragrance. And then souls that are what? Violently extracted and cursed by the angels. Who in this room can guarantee which one of those two they're going to be? And no one would have the audacity. We have immense hope that Allah takes us out of this world, which is why, again, one of the themes that we've been, I think we did it last week as well, was what? Connect yourselves to these awrad. Yalla biha, yalla bil husn al-khatima wal qabul. Right? Every day we're asking for this, aren't we? Oh, Allah, give us husn al-khatima. So here, what? Marhaban. That's the nature, the reality of the soul. And the reality is a true reality. Why? Because now the veils are lifted. But never ever underestimate the power of tawbah. You have done many things. We have done many things in our lives. But we look forward to the what? Inni qadimtu ala rabbin kareem. What a how did the mother feel when she heard that? Knowing what her son, she knew her son. Parents know their children. How did she feel when she heard the voice of her son from beyond, from the barzakh, to say these words? And again, it shows the power of what? The power of the dua of one's mother. The power of the dua of one's parents. When we were translating in the Trodden Path, the book on the rights of one's parents, towards the tail end of the book, and it's quite a weighty book. It makes you realize you're doing nothing for your parents. But there's a section on the book how when the rights have been clarified in relation to what's upon us in relation to our parents, there's a whole section on how the parents should not necessarily impose those rights upon their children. Why? Because by imposition of the rights of a parent towards a child, in the absence of the child fulfilling those rights, is immense problem, sin. It's problematic. So there's even a section of how parents shouldn't want to, quote unquote, exact the rights from their children, not impose those types of rights upon their children. But here we're clearly showing you what? the manifestation of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, La hijaba. There's no veil between the supplication of a parent for one's child. Many of us, I'm a parent, many of us are here, are parents. Make supplication for your children. There's no veil, there's no veil. And overlook, irrespective of how they may have treated me, you, or us, overlook what they've done. Don't be the reason by which you cause their what? Ruin, wa'iyadhu billah. But more importantly, like we're saying here, never ever diminish or forget the power of tawbah, particularly in the month of God, in the month of Rajab. When we spoke about this, whether it was last week or the week before, the night we gathered together, saying how when the Prophet, in a gathering, 70 to 100 times, what's he going to say? Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. Like his breathing, his conversation is what interspersed with what? Seeking forgiveness from Allah. 70 what? In one gathering, not in one day, in one gathering. Marhaban, how many sins does the Prophet have to seek forgiveness? Right? How many sins does he have to seek forgiveness 70 times a day, 100 times a day? La ilaha illallah. Al-Muhim, going back to here, so he speaks about what? The barzakh. Okay, what's the barzakh? It's a barrier. In language, it means al-waqi', ay al-barrier. Allah says in the Quran, Marj al-Bahrayni yaltaqiyan baynahuma barzakhun la yabghiyan. That between the two what? Oceans or seas that come to meet is what? A barzakh, a barrier. And so this is a barrier that Allah, we mentioned in the verse that he mentioned from the Quran, وَمِن وَرَائِهِمْ بَرْزَخٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. That like I said, this is one of the words from what? The Abbad. Many will still translate this as what? What's wara mean? Behind them. Okay, wara is a word in the Arabic it holds polar opposite meanings. It can mean in front of and behind. And so I would say that those who have translated the Quran with a great understanding of tradition and language translate as what? Not wara'uhum, amamahum, i.e. before them, in front of them, is a barzakh, a barrier, ila yawmi yub'athun. So now someone's going to be placed what? In this barzakh, in this interspace, i.e. alim al-qabr, the realm of the graves, up until what? The day that they are resurrected. And so he brings away, in the comment they bring what? A narrative of Sayyidina Uthman. That Sayyidina Uthman, he would frequent the graves. And he's going to speak about what? The rights of someone who's passed away. And from the right, i.e. there's the rights, the R-I-T-E-S, i.e. the religious practices that are binding upon someone who's passed away. And then there's the rights, R-I-G-H-T, the rights of someone who has passed away. From the rights of someone who has passed away is that we visit them. And you see this again, first generation, whether it was Sayyidina Fatima, may Allah be pleased with her, visiting her blessed Uncle Sayyidina Hamza every Wednesday. Whether it was Sayyidina Aisha, visiting her family, her brothers, on a regular basis. So here he brings the narrative of what? Sayyidina Uthman. But why is it pertinent to what we're speaking about here? Because he says what? كَانَ عُثْمَانِ ibn Affan إِذَا وَقَفَ عَلَى قَبْرِ بَكَى. That never did Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him, sit at a grave, say that he wept. But how did he weep? حَتَّى يَبَلَّ لِحْيَتَهُ. Right? I always get astounded by this description. That someone's beard is just drenched, soaked in tears. Right? Some of us cry more than others. Some of us have seen people cry. But rarely do we see people cry to the extent that what? Literally their beard is soaked. But this is Sayyidina Uthman crying in this manner, particularly when he what? When he frequents the graves. And so someone said to him, like, what causes you to cry? And he says, Inna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qala, Inna al-qabra awwal manazil al-akhirah. Okay? So now we're speaking about veils being lifted. Why? Because he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Inna al-qabra, indeed the grave, manazil awwal manazil al-akhirah, is the first stages of what? The next life. فَإِن نَجَى مِنْهُ فَمَا بَعْدَهُ أَيْسَرٌ. So if the situation of your grave is good, then inshallah it's an indication of what's going to take place after, and that will be aysar, meaning facilitated. وَإِن لَمْ يَنْجُ مِنْهُ فَمَا بَعْدُ أَشَدُّ مِنْهُ. And if he or she does not have a good experience in the grave, then what happens after that is far worse. And that's in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. And the hadith goes on, but that's the pertinent part of the hadith. That now, when we're in the barzakh now, this is the first what? The first of the stages of the akhirah. And then they bring, is in relation to what? The su'al, the questioning now. that when a person is placed in his grave, in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, al-abdu إذا وضع في قبره وتولي وذهب أصابه. When a person now is set in his grave, and his companions, his friends, those people who he spend time with, they start to what? Depart. حتى إذا إنه يسمع قرع نعالهم. To the extent that the person in the grave, just as I told you before, the person who you wash is fully aware, save that he or she cannot articulate. Likewise here, they're going to hear the footsteps move off of the people who used to be from their kith, their kin, their friends in this life. آتاه ملكان فقعداه. Now two angels come and they what? Sit this person up. فيقولان له, and say to him, ما كنت تقول في هذا الرجل Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What did you say regarding this man Muhammad? May peace and blessings be upon him. فيقول, a person of La ilaha will say what? أشهد أنه عبد الله ورسوله. I bear witness, O angels, that he is the servant of God and his messenger. فيقال انظر إلى مقعدك من النار أبدلك الله به مقعدا من الجنة. Sahih Bukhari this is. Right? This part of the hadith I find interesting. That when he testifies to what? The Prophet being the servant of God and his messenger, they say to him, look at your place in the fire. Abdalak Allah, because of your response, that the person, we're all an admixture of we're just a mess, aren't we? Right? Good deeds, bad deeds. No one knows. Good day, bad day, we're not too sure. We have hope, but we're an admixture of all of this sin and inshallah some good deeds. And so he says, because of the response that this person gives, he goes, look now to what? Your place in the fire. قَدْ أَبْدَلَكَ اللَّهُ بِهِ مَقْعَدْ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ. That Allah now has exchanged that for a place where? In heaven. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فيراهما جميعا, and they will all gaze upon it. أما الكافر والمنافق وعياذ بالله. As for a disbeliever or someone who is a person of hypocrisy, فيقول, i.e. when he's asked, what do you say about Muhammad? لا أدري. Look at that. The munafiq, he won't be allowed, i.e. because when the Prophet described the fear-inducing appearance of these angels, because Sayyidina Umar we're going to come with a hadith that's mentioned in a moment about Sayyidina Umar, but here what? The munafiq, the person of hypocrisy, is rendered what? Impotent. La adri. La adri, la adri. And we come to the time of, as we said, fustatan. That's the time we're in now, coming to that fustatan, those two groups. Fustanun iman la nifaqa fi. A group that's going to have iman, no hypocrisy. وَفُسْتَاتُ نِفَاقٍ لَا إِيمَانَ فِيهِ. And a people of hypocrisy that have no iman. Whereas here he says, the person of hypocrisy or disbeliever says, لا أدري. كنت أقول ما يقول الناس. I just said what everyone else said. Right? Muslims are not meaning, particularly when you study theology, can you take theology from another person in relation to I believe what he believes? No. That's part of it. You have to study theology. You have to know what you believe. And in theology they speak about what? Ilahiyat, divinity, knowing God. Nubuwa, and prophecy. Eschatology, sim'iyat, when it comes towards the end of time. You can't follow someone in these things. You have to learn these things. Because look at the response here. كنت أقول ما يقول الناس. That the hypocrite and disbeliever, I said just what everyone else said. ثم يضرب بمطرقة من حديد ضربة بين أذنيه. Then the person will be struck with a mitraqah, like a hammer, between his on his face. فيصيح صيحة يسمعها من يليه إلا الثقلين. Sahih Bukhari. That when a person is struck with this mitraqah, everything in that vicinity will hear it apart from the jinn and human beings. The animals hear it, they start to flee. Everything is hearing it, the trees hear it. But the only one that won't be able to discern it is what? Human beings and the jinn. Sahih al-Bukhari. So the hadith or the narrative of Sayyidina Umar that's mentioned by Imam al-Maqdisi in Kitab al-Tafsir, he says that the Prophet, and he's describing the fierce nature of these angels, Malikan, Nakir, Munkar wa Nakir. And he goes, they're fierce without light. Voices karra'ad. Right? A few weeks ago, the thunder went off here. A few weeks, or was it a month or so ago? Everyone shook. Voices karra'ad. Their voice is going to be like thunder. They hold a mitraqa, again, a hammer, Not like some hammer of Thor or some, the hammer. That the Prophet says what? That if the thaqalain, again, the two weighty beings, the entire corpus of humanity and the Jan came together, they could not lift it up. And that's what they're going to strike people with. And so here what happens, Sayyidina Umar, he's listening. And he says, La ilaha illallah, Ya Rasulullah, ayatiyanani wa ana thabit kama ana. Meaning, when the Prophet is describing these angels, Umar says what? He goes, when they come, am I going to be like I am right now? Meaning, we spoke about the munafiq, isn't it? Yeah, I just said what other people said. Umar saying, hang on a second, I'm a person of faith. Yeah. When they come asking these questions, am I going to be like I am right now? So the Prophet says, Naam. Yes. So what does Umar say? Sa'akfika huma ya Rasulullah. I'm good. I'm good. I've got this one. Right? And so when Umar says what? In this book, Kitab al-Tafsir, when he says, Sa'akfikum ya Rasulullah, I'll take care of it, ya Rasulullah. The Prophet goes, when you said this, now, at this point, Gabriel just came and told me something. And he goes, Gabriel came and said to me that when they ask you, Umar, in the grave, you're going to say to him, Allahu Rabbi man Rabbukuma. Allah's my Lord. What about you two? Munkar and Nakir. Who's your Rabb? Wa Muhammad Nabi. Wa man Nabiyukuma. Muhammad is my prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What about you two? Who's your prophet? Well, Islamu dini, ma dinukuma. And Islam is my religion. What about you two? What's your religion? And so what do the angels say? They say, wa ajaba. This is an odd one. Right? This is an odd one. Ma nadri, nahnu arsalna ilayka aw anta arsalta ilayna. We don't know. Were we sent to you or you sent to us? That's the state of certain people. And one of our dear teachers from the Bible was teaching this, and he was speaking about what? There's no wahsha. Right? There's no wahsha for the person who is connected or again committed to his faith at the point of death, and likewise in the grave. That we can think this is something khususiyah, and no doubt Sayyidina Umar has an immense khususiyah. He has an immense uniqueness to him. But the Prophet ﷺ said, "Laysa ala ahli la ilaha illallah wahshatun fil maut, wala fil qabr." That a person committed to his faith, someone who lives and dies by la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, has no wahsha, has no feeling of loneliness or being discarded or neglected or forsook at the point of death. Wala fil qabr, wala fil nushur, nor when they are what? Raised. كأني أنظر إليهم عند السيحة. And the Prophet says, I'm gazing upon them, these different points, these different trials. ينفضون رؤوسهم فيقول الحمد لله الذي أذهب عن الحزن. Right? I'm looking upon them, and all they're saying at these moments, thank God, all praise for Allah that just removed any type of sadness or sorrow at these moments. At these moments. There's no loneliness, inshallah. And then our teachers tell us a story of two individuals. About one woman, she was yani salihah, she was like from the people of piety. Famatat, so she passes away. And her daughter sees her in a dream. And she's passed away. And so she said, well, what happened to you at death? She goes, ajaban, like this oddity occurred. She goes, I wake up and I'm in the grave. And I'm in the grave and no one's coming to me to question me. And she goes, I waited 1, 2, 3, 6 hours and no one came. And she goes, at the point of waiting, now the right side of my grave collapses. And now I just see this paradisial garden. And she goes, I'm looking upon this paradisial garden and I see two women. And so I go to them, I approach them. And she goes, am I dead? And she goes, yes. They go, yeah, you're dead. She goes, well, why didn't I get questioned? She goes, this specific barzakh, what we're speaking about now, is a paradisial barzakh that no one who enters this will be questioned by the angels. Uniqueness that's given to certain people from the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the Habaib, they tell us another story. Two friends had a unique brotherhood. Remember, brotherhood is from amongst what? Those people that receive the shade of Allah's throne on a day where there's no shade. Right? Brotherhood is what? Brotherhood is those people. يَغْبِتُهُمْ الْأَنْبِيَاءُ وَالشُّهَدَاءُ وَلَيْسُوا بِأَنْبِيَاء وَلَا شُهَدَاء. Brotherhood, true brothers, that will be resurrected upon what? Pulpits of light. envied by who? Envied by the prophets and the martyrs, them not being but what? Prophets or martyrs. اجتمعوا على ذكر الله فاذكروه. They gathered what? Just to remember God, and therefore they remembered God. So this special type of brotherhood that exists. So two friends in brotherhood, what do they say to one another? They say, look, if I die before you, or you die before me, don't forget to what? Seek tawbah for me. Always consistently pray for me. Marhaban, deal, pact. And so comes time, one of them dies before the other. So the person supplicates, and he goes, I supplicated him for a year straight, every single day without fail. Oh, Allah forgive him, Allah bless light in his grave, ila akhirihi, whatever du'as he made for this particular individual, based on what? This brotherhood. And so again, after a year, he goes, I saw my friend now in a dream. And I said again, how are you? What's the barzakh like? What does he say? Something odd happened, ajaban, again, something strange happened. He goes, what? He goes that during my life, I would sleep, and the first thing I would do when I'd wake up, I'd say, Alhamdulillah, li ahyana ba'da amatana wa ilayhi nushur. The dua that we say when what? When we wake up from sleep. And he goes, so I wake up, and then I look for my siwak. Because again, it was a sunnah for the first thing the Prophet would do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was what? Yastaq, he would use to braid his teeth, clean his teeth, wouldn't he? And so he didn't realize he was in his grave. And so he goes, I wake up and I say, Alhamdulillah, alladhi ahyana ba'da ma amatana wa ilayhi nushur. And he goes, and I go and I try and grab Allah, and like, where's my siwak? And so he goes, I said, Ahmed, he's calling for his son. He goes, Aina siwaki, where's my siwak, Ahmed? Then the angels come to him, saying what? They said, who are you calling? Do you know where you are? He goes, he didn't even remember that he was dead. When he sees the angels, he goes, what? Oh, subhanAllah, I remembered what? I remember dying. And I remember being washed. And I remember being shrouded. And I remember being what? Buried. And so he said, I started to say again, Alhamdulillah, alladhi ahyana ba'da amatana wa ilayhi nushur. All praise is for the one again who now has truly brought us back to life, after he caused us to die, and unto him is our nushur, is our resurrection, our returning back to. So they said, Anta min as-salihin la su'ala alayk. Yeah, there's no questioning from you. You're from the people of what? Piety. So there's certain people in our tradition that we saw the khususiyah for who? Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. Likewise, inshallah, there'll be a khususiyah for many people from the ummah of al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So again, for people committed to their faith, inshallah, there's no what? There's no loneliness at death. There's no sadness at death. There's no sadness in the grave. There's no sadness at the nushur. The grave will expand, inshallah. And we spoke last week about what? Even at the point of death, the verse in the Quran, يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ. يُثَبِّتُ Allah. Again, always remind yourselves of these realities. You are not the person who, from any type of great thing that you've done, are procuring these immense gifts. These gifts, يُثَبِّتُ Allah. Allah will give you these things. يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ. Allah will make or aid those people who believe بِقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ. What's قَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ here? Saying La ilaha illallah at the point of death. Ya Mu'adh, Ya Mu'adh, Ya Mu'adh. O Mu'adh, 3 times, Labayk ya Rasulullah, Labayk ya Rasulullah, Labayk ya Rasulullah. Shall I not tell you something? Right? Man yashhadu an la ilaha illallah at the point of death, last thing he says, Harram Allahu alayhi an-nar. Allah prohibits this person from what? Or prohibits, the fire from touching such an individual. Ala ukhbir an-nas ya Rasulullah? Should I not tell the people, a messenger of God? La innahum yattakilu. No, because some people just depend upon this. This is the stupidity of man, isn't it? Oh, I'm good. What I'll do just before I die, I say La ilaha illallah, and it's all good. Do you know how overwhelming the pangs of death are? We just saw with the munafiq. Oh, I'll go to Hajj, when I'm 60 plus. You wish you could have gone for Hajj. Who's thought audacious that's going to claim they're going to live to the age of X, Y, and Z to go and perform the Hajj or the Umrah? La innahum yattakilu. That no, don't tell the people. Why? Because they're just going to depend upon these types of statements. Okay? And obviously we know why does Sayyidina Mu'adh convey what he conveyed when the Prophet told him not to? Because what overrides that, before passing away, kitman al-ilm. So for someone to hide knowledge, it's highly problematic. Which is why they would convey things very close to what passing away, to make sure that they fulfill the trust that they had with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sorry, we've just read the first few words of the book. he goes on now to the, I think it's the second sentence. Yeah. When a Muslim dies and death is confirmed, he has to now be prepared for the grave. Thus, he should be washed, shrouded, and prayed over, all of which must be done according to the prophetic sunnah. His relatives, neighbors, and friends must be informed, and also the people of goodness and virtue, so that they pray and ask mercy for him and attend his funeral. Now, there's something specific I want to do with this, inshallah, next week. So this is a slightly shorter lesson than usual, but we're going to stop here, inshallah. So next week we're going to do something very specific. I've yet to confirm it. I'll confirm it with the organizers. But it's related to the rights when someone passes away. However, just to reiterate the statement, so when a person dies and death is confirmed, someone's now grave has to be prepared. We took this hadith last week, did we not? Yeah. Count yourselves now from the people of the grave. Thus, what are the rights binding upon the ummah towards such an individual? That they be washed, that they be shrouded, that they be prayed over, and all this must be done. And all this must be done according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then likewise, one's relatives, neighbors, friends must be informed in relation to what? Not just informing, like the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Sayyidina Najashi, Na'a Rasulullahi Maut Najashi, that the Prophet announced, or had announced the death of Najashi. But likewise in relation to what? Rights that may be binding over the person, that need to be hastened to be fulfilled before a person is placed in the graves, or at least within the first few days after someone passes away. And likewise, what is the must is to ask the people of piety and goodness that they seek forgiveness and mercy for you and attend the janazah. Tamam, inshallah. So we'll stop here. Is there any questions? طيب الله يبارك فيكم. السلام عليكم.